guys, and welcome to Bonnet and Blade. Today, Jess is going to be my guinea pig. I'm going to dress up, not just for fancy dress, but for real live role play within the reenactment world. 17th century, Civil War, the English Civil War. We do the reenactment as a cavalry. Today, Jess is dressed right now as a Royalist cavalry member, the Cavalier. How can we tell that she's a Cavalier? Well, you can tell by the hat for a start. So we start from the top here. Excuse me having a camera in my hand. We're going to do close-ups, so I've got the camera ready to be able to do close-ups. Jess has got the Cavalier soft hat. Soft hat as opposed to the metal tri-frame which you're going to see later. This is all about being glam and poncy. The Royalists had money, they had status, and they wanted to show everyone that they had status. So following on from that status, they come down and they have protection. They've got the armour, metal armour, just the same as the parliamentarians would. There's a difference now though. The buff coat stops here because they have their doublet on with a slit sleeve showing their very expensive cotton. They have wealth, they can show off their cotton. Any of the lower soldiers would be in linen or muslin. That would be a cheap material. It certainly wouldn't be cotton. Coming down then, they've got their red sash that shows that they're part of the Royalist army. They've got their doublet. Also, Jess hasn't got on today, but normally the collar would be a little bigger than this with some lace on it just to show their status again. As much lace and ponce as possible. That's exactly how they want to be. Then you can come down and you can see the leather gauntlets. The leather gauntlets come down and protect the arm. They've got both for the left and right, the sword hand and the rein hand, both protected. You will see that Jess also has a gauntlet that she'll wear separate. It's called a bridal gauntlet. That bridal gauntlet is used for when they're out in the army and they're sword fighting. This protects the steering on the horse because that's a vulnerable hand. Any sword coming down is protected by metal, but only people again with money and status had this. Coming down, we've got the red breeches. The red breeches again was a sign of the Royalist army. And then going on to the buff or tan coloured bucket top boots. The reason why tan or buff coloured, the leather, you can see the imperfections if it's tan or buff colour because there's no dye to be able to hide it. The black, they can disguise any blemishes that were in the leather, so it's only the best cuts of leather that go into these boots. So again, we have money, we're going to spend it. It's the Royalist kind of ethos. However, we have a problem. And the problem is that the Royalist army is fighting against the parliamentarian. The parliamentarian is the government and it controls everything. And they said, do not sell arms or armour to the Royalist army. So, with that in mind, the Royalist army could not buy arms or armour from any British wholesaler. So anything that they needed or required had to come from the soldiers' own personal collection. Possibly they did the 30 Years' War. If they were noble or of status, they were definitely over in the 30 Years' War and they would have their own kit, probably their own buff coat. They'd certainly have their own sword. But the lower classes within the Royalist army wouldn't. So they'd be going out with pitchforks and anything that they could get hold of to begin with because they weren't being issued with proper equipment, unlike the parliamentarian army, which we'll go through in more detail just shortly. So the Royalist army were struggling to get the right facts, figures for their equipment in. So how did they get round it? Well, Prince Rupert, King Charles I's nephew, he was from Germany and he had contacts on the continent from the 30-Year War. So what did he do? He used those contacts to get Dutch helmets in. So the tricorn helmet that you know of for the parliamentarians, that's why they're called the Roundheads. This is the Cavaliers, the round of the helmet. Their helmets have 3 bars on the front. but the Dutch helmet had a single nasal bar that came down the front. And so you're starting to see that Royalist members sometimes had a single nasal bar helmet that had come from the continent. So the continent was drip feeding equipment into the army, the Royalist army. And so they were getting equipment and they were getting arms and armament, but it was a lot slower and less proficient than the parliamentarian. So coming to swords, if I can get Jess to get her sword for me. So she's got a slightly fancier baldric, and everything here has got nice brass buckles and it's showing it off to its best. So this is her mortuary sword. The rapier is more for slashing quickly, it's for getting in, it's cutting, slashing, getting in. And if she pulls it slightly out the scabbard, you'll see that the blade is very thin and narrow. It's not designed for walloping. It would soon bend and break. It's not got that rigidity that the mortuary sword has. But it's still got the level of protection through a sort of basket style network on the basket hilt. If they were very lucky and they were an officer, they may have a pole arm. This was when they're off the horses and they're coming in to either battle on the ground, or better still, they may decide that they're on parade and they want to show their status. They'd have the pole arm. This pole axe would not be used on board a horse. When they're mounted, this would be too much of a liability. There are pole axes that are used mounted, but this style would not be used. And then if they were very, very lucky, they may have a pistol. So they would have a pair of pistols if they were mounted, and these pistols will go into special pistol holders on the horse, which we'll show you in a little bit closer details. These are replicas, these are not real pistols, so I won't go into detail too much with them. These are flintlock prism pistols, but you get doglock and all sorts of different pistols. But because these are not real and they're used just to fill the space, I'm not going to go into too much detail because they're not accurate. Way! So that's Jess back now with us. Jess is now in full parliamentarian outfit, checking from bottom to top. So going back to the top, this is a lobster pot. Why is it a lobster pot? Well, if we come round to the back, you'll see that the articulating back is very much like a lobster's tail. So it's known as a lobster pot because of the back. It's like a tail of a lobster. Coming to the front, we talked about the tri-bar. 1, 2, 3. 3 bars at the front which lift up like a visor. But that's the difference in the helmet. So a lot more protection. Swords can't get through. They're very much blocked. The only way they could get through is like the rapier with a piercing motion. We could have our eye, and if it was, it would be game over because it would go straight through, brain dead. You can see protection for her ears. She can hear us talking, but she's not going to have her ear chopped off. So that's protection. Same body armour. Her local blacksmith probably made that for her. So just like the Royalist, they would have had that. Slightly different in the buff coat. You see the buff coat is complete, full, long officer's buff coat. Why we say officers, there's a little bit more scalloping around the edges. So the scalloped edges just make it a bit fancier. Buff leather is very expensive. Originally it was buffalo, which is why it's called buff leather. Although I believe they use all sorts of different leathers like elk and things. I'm not a leather expert, but I know that it's to do with the tanning process now. So this particular buff coat is a full buff coat, protection everywhere. Her arms are protected, her lower arms, it comes right the way down and almost lines up with the bucket tops. You just lift your buff coat up a bit, just show the black breeches, and then the line of the buff coat. So there's very little that she couldn't get sliced with a rapier. There's very little it's going to slice her because she's very well protected from top to toe. So the buff coats were issued to the parliamentarians. The buff coat was the same cost to the soldier as a horse would be. So in today's money, it would be about £4,000, which is actually very similar to the cost of a horse, depending on how good a horse you get. Maybe it would be double that if you got a fancy one, but you could certainly pick up a horse for £4,000 nowadays. Coming down and looking, she's got the mortuary sword again. Swords did not depict the side. The swords were used both by the Roundheads and the Cavaliers, parliamentarians and the royalists. Then looking at the mortuary sword, you can see that there's a little bit something fancy here. This is very much in status with whether you were an officer within the parliament or the royalist, or if you had money. Each little finger articulates, they're all protected, they've all got little bits of armour on them, and it goes right the way up the arm to the elbow, so that's all protected right up to there. They're fantastic bit of armour, because your arm is vulnerable when you're riding along and you've got hold of the reins. That arm is just sitting, holding the reins, bouncing along. You've got no protection at all apart from this bridle gauntlet. You've just got the leather. You're going to possibly get a broken finger or broken fingers if you don't get more damage with the sword cutting through. The bridle gauntlet can be used on both sides. Jess actually represents the royalist army within the sealed knot, and that is her bridle gauntlet, so she uses it for both sides. And it'd be more about status now than it is about which side you're in. So coming down, she's got the black bucket tops. We talked earlier about the fact that the bucket tops, depending on the colour of the leather, depends on the quality of the leather, but the royalists are about, you know, safe, regimented army, get in, get out. They're all going to look very similar. They're not the same. Nothing was mass produced. It was all tailored or made by the local craftsmen, but they were very similar because the army supplied a lot of the kit, or the soldiers could get it from the new model army. Now, the new model army was something that was brought in by
Sir Thomas Fairfax.
Sir Thomas Fairfax, well done, Jess. And
Oliver Cromwell.
And at what battle did they launch the new model army?
At Naseby.
This is like 20 questions, see if we can trip her up. She's gone red. Is she panicking
Oh my
now?
gosh.
She's panicking now, she's panicking. I'm going to let her off with that, she's done really well. So yes, that's when the new model army came out, and that was its make or break. And did they succeed?
Parliaments did, yes.
Yeah, so the new model army worked. The only thing I'm going to say is Jess is in an orange sash. That is traditionally what the parliamentarians wore at the beginning of the Civil War. When the new model army came in, they changed the colour of sash to blue because the orange and the red were very similar depending on the shades. Depending on how much blood was exchanged, they could be mistaken. Blue certainly couldn't be mistaken, so they went for blue with the new model army, and the blue sash versus the orange was much more easy to depict who was your team, if you like, than the other. Also, one of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about today was the new model army had a special branch. We're going into like detective work. Dun, 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 dun. So tell us about this special branch, Jess.
So Sir Arthur Hasselrig set up a team of lobsters. What the lobsters were heavy cavalry. So they had.
Did they weigh a lot?
Well, technically yes, actually. So the full suit of armour, covering everything, all the way down to just the knee, and you'd have your bucket tops underneath. But they weren't as agile and as fast, and also they needed a special kind of horse to be able to take the weight, which there was becoming less and less of.
Okay.
Hence why heavy cavalry were coming away and the light cavalry were more prominent.
Can you show us roughly how manoeuvrable you are with the kit you've got on?
Not overly, I'm like a... I mean, I can move, don't get me wrong, but I can bend down, ooh, off balance. But you do feel really rigid.
Okay.
And sometimes...
What's that, the can-can? What are you doing the can-can?
Depending on how bad my knees are that day, I struggled to get my foot in the stirrup.
Okay. And she's arrived. What's the difference between this and medieval armour?
Difference. This medieval armour is just, when they were in combat, they were using lances as impact.
Yep.
So they needed a thicker gauge steel to be able to take the impact. And also the difference, the helmets were different. So if I feel like C3PO right now, but if I was to put my visor down, it's quite frog-eyed.
Go on then.
You guys can see it at the top there.
I'm going to just move your microphone onto your eye.
And shut me in. Yep. So actually, compared to medieval helmet, I can see. Whilst my vision is still very much restricted, my hearing is very much restricted. It's not as bad as a medieval helmet.
Okay.
They've only got the slits in the eyes. Another thing to note is the armour stops at my knees. Now, medieval armour would have my legs fully encased in plate armour, including my feet. I'd have sabatons on top of my shoes. So that's the main difference. And also, I don't have metal gauntlets. I'm in leather gauntlets because the whole point of the Cuirassier is what they did was fire pistols. And obviously, if you've got metal gauntlets on, you can't put black powder and whatever else and fire your pistol. It's just going to be almost impossible. So, you have leather gauntlets or there's armour for that reason.
Can I just move your microphone and open you back up again,
Yes,
so that
quite warm in here.
our historians can hear you all? Kiwi.
Oh, that's better.
I'm going to put it back up on here so we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's quite warm in there.
Do you want to turn round and give us a full 360 of what it looks like? So you're quite vulnerable at the back. I mean, I could come along and boot you up the bum and, you know, you're vulnerable. So,
I don't think that was in the actual combat.
well, the one saving grace is I suppose you'll be sitting your bahookie down on the horse.
This is only designed for cavalry.
Yes, it's not for jumping off and getting close combat.
Absolutely not.
No, okay. How manoeuvrable is it compared to the buff coat you were in before?
It's a little heavier, not gonna lie. How manoeuvrable my arms are.
So although it's a bit jerky, it's still actually very manoeuvrable, really.
I can move,
Yeah.
and my legs are very well articulated.
So can you bend
I
down?
can bend my knees. Oh, it's so heavy I'll probably fall over. But
Let's do it for a laugh, come on. Oh, you're down. Can you get back up? Well done. Well guys, that brings us to the end for today. We've gone through the heavy cavalry. We've gone through the lighter buff coat in-out parliamentarian, and we've also had the royalist dandy look good. So hopefully it's giving you an insight into what actually was meant by the Roundhead and the Cavalier. And if you then found out about lobsters, you now know what a lobster is. And so hopefully it's giving you an insight and allows you to get up close to all the equipment that we have. Some of it isn't 17th century, but it's authentic. So you're getting real up close to what actually would have been used back in the day. Some of this stuff doesn't exist anymore. Some of the leather gun holsters and buff coats that have disintegrated. So we're bringing this stuff up close to you exactly how it would have been done back in the day. So all the stuff that was back in the day is now brought to you close up. The Portuguese saddle. The saddle that we use is the closest thing to the 17th century saddle you can have. And so we use the Portuguese saddle. It's very, very similar, and when you're all kitted out with the gun holsters at the front and you're on this horse riding away, it would be very difficult for someone to be able to depict from a painting or something that that person's not in a genuine 17th century saddle. That's how it was all brought, and it's been brought to you real life, bang on perfect. We're all getting knackered now, so we're going to call it a day. So from me, Grant,
and me, Jess.
good night, and we'll see you soon. And hopefully the next video we'll be able to bring something just as exciting, if not better. Keep
See you
watching,
later.
like and subscribe.